You're listening to another episode of HC Daily, a daily devotional podcast that you can listen to at home or on the go. We believe that you can grow as much as you want to grow spiritually, and this podcast can be a part of your daily growth plan. So, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify or your favorite podcast app, we're glad you're here. Now, let's join our hosts, Jeff Forrester and Chris Zarbaugh, in the studio.
Chris.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Thank you for hosting today.
I tried to say Jeffrey and I stopped and I said Jeffa.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's okay. I don't care what you call me. Just call me for lunch.
There you go.
That's what's important. But thank you for hosting today.
Hey, I am a host according to Wesley.
Yeah, I know.
By the way, that's Wesley who introduces us on the
right.
podcast.
Regardless of whether they're on the road or at home.
Yes.
Right? They're listening.
See, he's saying that because we get to listen to this introduction every time. So we film, 10 podcasts in a row today.
They've been listening over every day, so they've been hearing it too.
Yeah, they've been hearing it too, but not like 10 in a row like we have.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, we're very excited about doing these podcasts. We're amazed at the stories we're getting, right?
Sure.
People using these as family devotions in the morning before school, people that are using it while they're listening to it on the podcast side instead of watching the video while they're running on the treadmill, all kinds of things. We're just super glad that we get to be a part of, a small part of their day, pointing them towards Jesus and what God's word has to say. And we just want to ask you, make sure you share it, right? On your social media platforms, whatever. Tell your friends and family. Help us get the word out. We'll be able to serve more people. It's been, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people that have been engaging with it. And we just want to help as many people as we can with this. So
yeah,
share it.
It's been a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah. So we are today looking at Mark chapter 4. And in Mark chapter 4, we're just going to read a few verses, but this is where Jesus calms the storm. And really, it's one of the times that Jesus establishes that he has authority over nature.
Yep.
Right? So yesterday we read about how he had authority over sins, and he has authority over physical issues. Now he's establishing he has authority over nature. So we're going to read Mark chapter 4, verse 35, and I'll just read the next 6 verses or so. It says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. And so they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion, and the disciples woke him up, shouting, Teacher, don't you care we're going to drown? And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, Silence, be still. And suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. And then he asked them, Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? The disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. Even the wind and waves obey him.
Yeah. And it's a quick story, but it's amazing because I think in the last series, The Greatness in You, we sort of talked about how the Sea of Galilee was conditioned to have sudden squalls. And it's always, worth pointing out that these guys are expert fishermen, and they row for a living, and they deal with the squalls in this lake specifically because it's the only freshwater source around, and it's a big source.
And people who spend a lot of time on a lake, you really get to know that lake.
Oh yeah,
you know where the shallows are, you know where the big waves come in, you know all that stuff. So these guys typically probably wouldn't be caught by surprise.
Yeah,
but they are here.
And they call it the Sea of Galilee, but it is more of a lake.
Yeah.
But it was 7 miles across and 180 feet deep in the middle at its deepest point.
Yeah.
So that's pretty deep.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so here they are thinking we're going to drown. Now, any time, an expert says we're going to drown, it's got to be pretty bad.
Yeah.
And
Put
Jesus,
on your life jacket.
Yeah, and Jesus is sleeping. And I don't know if he was just coincidentally sleeping out of sheer exhaustion.
I think so. Yeah, if you look at the ministry that's been happening prior here, he's getting overwhelmed with healings and teachings, and the crowds are pressing in. I think he's in an exhausted state. And this is one of those times when sometimes he says to the disciples, let's go up into the mountains or let's go out in the wilderness. This time he's saying, let's get out and across the lake. I just can't, because the boats are harassing him. He's got paparazzi. Right? That's what it says.
Right.
It says, he says he leaves the crowds behind. That's why he's leaving, although other boats follow. They're out there, and it just won't leave Jesus alone.
Well, they have no cameras, Jeff.
Yeah, well, they're etching on their on
chi-
their clay tablets.
chiseling the image that they're looking
Yeah,
at.
that's right. But they're really dialed in, chasing Jesus around. He's feeling harassed, I think, a little bit, and he's just exhausted. So he goes into the boat. It's a 7-mile, 8-mile trip maybe that they're going to cut across the lake, and it's going to take a while. And so he lays down to take a nap, and it makes total sense to me. I think it was exhaustion here, to be honest with you.
So the thing that I love about this passage, in fact, I heard it years and years ago, and I've never forgotten it, is that this story starts with Jesus giving the intention, like, we're going to go to the other side of the lake, right? So there's a promise of sorts given there.
Yeah.
We're going to the other side of the lake. Let's go to the other side of the lake. So if Jesus says you're going to go to the other side, it means you're going to make it to the other side.
That's right.
And so here's the disciples, and they're fearing of, the conditions that they're in.
Although I would like him to be a little clear and say, let's all be alive when we get to the other side of the lake. That would be useful.
As opposed to washing up on shore. Yeah. So in the midst of the squall, in the midst of the fear and the waves and the wind and the impending doom, it would have been really nice. Think about this, for one person just to have remembered his words, and said, because wouldn't it have been cool if somebody would have stood up and said, "Wait a minute, Jesus said we're going to the other side of the lake," and then say, "Do you remember him saying other side of the lake, other side of the lake? Do you remember him saying other side, right, other side? Hey, we're going to make it." And then somebody says, "We're sinking." Well, maybe Jesus knows a shortcut. Maybe we're going to go down and pop up on the other side. Who knows? Because I have faith, because he said it, and we're going. And so it's just one of those things where, if Jesus is with you and he says, this is what we're doing, you can bank on it regardless.
The safest place in the world is wherever Jesus is.
Right.
So just go be with Jesus. What they should have done is gotten their pillows and gone taking a nap too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But they felt responsible. They've got this precious cargo. I think they loved Jesus at this point. They just didn't really understand who he was. Right. And
well, that's made clear because they said, "Who is this man where the winds and the waves even obey him?"
Yeah. And by the way, they were terrified of the storm. When it's all done, they were absolutely terrified of Jesus.
Right.
Right. That's what it says there in verse 41. They were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. Even the wind and waves obey him.
Yeah.
So it was, oh no, the storm is horrible. And then he stands up and he goes, "Peace, be still."
Right.
And now they're like, who the heck's this guy?
Right.
Now, what's amazing is he's healed people. He's done a lot of miracles, but this is the first time they saw him control nature.
Yeah.
Right? This is the creator that they're getting a peek at. Right? This isn't just some healer, miracle worker. This is the creator of the world who goes, "You're interrupting my nap. Calm down."
Yeah.
Right?
And here's another thing that I picture in my head, which is significant, because he didn't do some dramatic thing, right? Like even Moses had to hold up the staff in a dramatic way for the waters to part in the Old Testament. So Jesus doesn't do anything dramatic. So Dr. Strange, man, he was whipping himself around to hold back that water coming back from the dam in Endgame. Right. And then he didn't do a spell, all that kind of stuff. He didn't do anything.
He just rubs the sleep out of his eyes and says, "Peace, be still."
Yeah, he just speaks. Yeah. He doesn't do anything dramatic. He literally wakes up and he's like, quiet.
Right.
And all of a sudden everything goes quiet.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine it's effortless. Yeah. Because it's just the spoken word.
This is one of those stories I think that capture everybody's attention. When my son, Jonathan, he was like 3 years old, we lived in Texas, and we were serving a church down there, and he had like a tricycle, and our driveway was kind of a long driveway, but it sloped towards the street. And so he was there, and he was wearing his Batman costume because, he lived in his Batman costume. And so he's on his tricycle, and it's kind of rolling backwards. And Bonnie says, "Jonathan, you stop, don't roll out in the street." And he goes, "Oh, the wind is blowing. Oh, the wind is blowing." And so I said, "Jonathan, don't get out in the street." He said, "It's blowing. I can't help it. It's blowing." And I said, "Jonathan, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to get spanking if you blow out in the street." And he stands up and he goes, "Peace, be still." And then he gets on his tricycle, rides up. He says, "Wow, it works for me too."
That's great. How old was he?
He was like 3 years old.
That's awesome.
Yeah. These kind of stories just capture your attention. And this is one of those things. Jesus is real. Jesus has power. This is a wow story. Yeah. I think all the healings are amazing, but we've seen people take medicine and get better. We've seen people who made it to the other side of their fever and get better. Maybe some of those are coincidental, right? That's what people could be thinking. But in this one, they're like, we've never seen anybody do this. Right. This is amazing.
Yeah, and I can even imagine like how you may have even heard. You can imagine because there's the Bible mentions like false prophets, and so false prophets could be rumors.
Yeah, sure.
That person was paralyzed. Was he really though?
Yeah, right.
Was that somebody was he planted there?
Right.
But it's inexcusable or not inexcusable. It's unmistakable.
Yes.
To see nature just obey.
And then these guys, they've lived with Jesus for a while now. Not for 3.5 years, but they've been with him quite a bit. They've seen him do a lot of things, and they still underestimate Jesus, right? They still underestimate the kind of power that he has, the impact that he has, and the fact that he cares about their specific situation. They've seen him care about other people, but their situation they missed.
That's an incredible application point, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So how long have we spent in ministry and in serving God with our faith? Forget ministry. I mean, just faith, right? Our faith walk. And we still underestimate Jesus all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And every new thing that comes up, we're like, oh, no.
Right.
And all we have to really do is look back and say, God has demonstrated himself faithful and powerful and sovereign my whole life.
Yeah.
And so, we underestimate Jesus all the time.
When I was working at that same church in Texas, and we were in the middle of a struggle with regard to, we had a very large building, and the church had declined substantially over the previous, 15 years before we got there. And next thing you know, the staff that's at this church, I was 27, the senior pastor was 30, and the youth pastor was 33. So the oldest guy on the staff was a youth pastor. It was all for us, all our first ministry experiences, really, on our own. And we had this 1,000-seat auditorium. We only had 110 people when we started there.
Wow.
So there's a lot of issues. And whenever you'd have guests come, they'd look and go, there's something wrong here. They wouldn't stay or whatever. And so one of the reasons why they brought me in was as a consultant to try to kind of figure out, partly my job, was to figure out what do we need to do different to get the church growing and maybe fix some of these issues. So one of the suggestions that we brought was we need to get out of the 1,000-seat auditorium. Let's just mothball it. Let's renovate this other part that used to be an auditorium in the building because we had 110,000 square feet. Let's renovate this other part, and we'll move in there. We'll grow up 500, 600, 700, then we can move back. And it seemed like a good idea. It wasn't going to cost very much money. We had a little bit of money. But some of the people who had built that building were in love with the building, and they were older than us substantially. And they were like, guys, we set that steel. We hung that drywall. We drove those nails, and they just emotionally couldn't make it. And they felt like we were trying to take something away from them. And we were just saying, let's grow back into it. Well, over the next 2 or 3 years, we grew, we quadrupled in attendance. It was incredible, the forward movement. But they refused. They wouldn't do it. So the next morning, we're not very good Christians. I'll just tell you that now. The three of us, we were really mad. We came out of that meeting. We got vetoed. The leaders would not move out of that auditorium. And we knew that was the right thing. So we're mad about it. Senior pastor goes, man.
So you weren't good Christians because you were angry.
Yeah. We were kind of mad at the other leaders at the church. We were having a bad attitude. So the pastor goes, man, I just wish God had sent us a hurricane to tear this whole building down. And the youth pastor, who was from Louisiana, right across the border from us, he goes, dude, this is the wrong time for hurricanes. It's a good time for tornadoes. And so the senior pastor goes, we should pray for a tornado. And I was like, oh, I'm all in. Let's pray for tornadoes. And I promise you, we got down on our knees in the office on Monday morning. We prayed God would send us a tornado to tear that building down.
Because you get the insurance money.
Yeah. And, we weren't worried about it. We just wanted to make a point to these other leaders that, we could get a hold of God or whatever. And I can remember it shifted from us being grumpy about it to like earnest, meaningful prayer. God, do whatever it takes to shake this organization off its foundation and prove that you're really with us, but get us out of that building. And I'm telling you, 7 days to the day, 1 week later, Bonnie and I are driving across from Houston back into the town where we lived. Storm is just going crazy, and a tornado had touched down on the back end of our property, knocked down a fence, hit our gymnasium, jumped over our daycare, which, by the way, had 240 kids in it. We didn't think about the kids in the daycare when we were praying. But it skipped the whole daycare. It landed on our auditorium, twisted our auditorium off the foundation, knocked down 250 feet of brick, and then went back up and didn't hit any more buildings, any more houses, or anything. We got God answered our prayers 7 days after we prayed and sent us a tornado and knocked down that building. And I'm telling you, everybody in the church went, we need to rethink our position on this, right? And all of a sudden, we shifted our strategies. We changed our focus. We began reaching people. We started leading so many people to Jesus. Everybody started pulling in the same direction because it was clear that God showed up and said, "I'm the God that can do these things."
So if I was going to that church, I would be more terrified of the tornado. I'd be more terrified of you guys.
Of our prayers.
Yeah.
Well,
Like, don't pray anything against me, buddy. Because that's amazing.
Yeah. It wasn't us. That was what was needed in the moment, and we had the courage to ask for it. That was it. But what God did was He demonstrated He's in control of all those things.
Yeah. So either that was one of the coolest miracles stories I've ever heard, and so unbelievable, or you're lying.
Yeah. Well, you can go on Beaumont. The news station came out, and along with the people from NOAA Weather, and they came out, surveyed the thing, and did this whole news thing about the fact this tornado hit our building, didn't touch anything else in the town.
It's amazing.
And they certified it as a little tornado. Yeah.
So really quick, the end of the story is you got the money and rebuilt the building?
Yeah. So insurance came. It was enough to remodel the other portion of the thing. We did everything that we needed to do, and the church just began to explode. We led so many people to Jesus. We baptized so many new believers. And the whole church, even the ones who resisted before, was convinced God was moving among us. And everybody, like in this situation, we're in awe of what God was doing, and we all were pulling in the same direction, making a huge impact in that community. It was really a dynamic couple of years there, and that was the catalyst behind it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So as we wrap up this story, is there any last thoughts that we can draw out of this scripture, out of this story?
Well, I would just say, don't underestimate His power to handle the crisis in your life, whatever that is. It might not mean that you need Him to send you a tornado, but the God that can control everything in nature certainly can handle your boss, can handle the temptation you're going through, can handle how to navigate through raising your child or repairing your marriage or helping you overcome an addiction. If God can do those things, He can certainly help us in the crisis that we're in. Not to minimize our crisis, but just to understand God can do anything.
Yeah, and He has power and authority over every single thing.
That's right.
God is in control.
Right.
Awesome. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about how Jesus casts out evil spirits.
Yeah, this full-on spiritual warfare in this one.
Yeah, woo. So we're excited, and we'll see you then, hopefully.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us spread the word by liking this episode and sharing it on your social media platforms. Be sure to leave a comment and review, and don't forget to give us 5 stars. When you do, you help us reach even more people who need a daily devotional like HC Daily. If you'd like to hear more from Chris and Jeff, they're both teaching pastors at Heritage Church, located in Southeast Michigan. You can get more of their messages by clicking on the Messages tab at heritagechurch.com. Be sure to join us again soon for another episode of HC Daily.